I'm now going to enter the realms of the rather bizarre. Perhaps one of the most obvious places where someone might expect to see a ghost is in a graveyard or the crypt of a church. I mean, these are the resting places of the dead after all. Well, I'm going to take you to the ruins of an old church somewhere in North Lancashire, into one of the crypts to be precise. This event happened first in 1976 and it's happened several times since then, the last time being only 18 months ago. Anyway, the people that this thing has happened to, 6 in all, have all experienced the same thing, even though they're unknown to each other. So there's no evidence of collusion in any way. So, in 1976, a group of young men and women had had a night out at the local, and on their way home they'd passed this ruined church, and in a fit of bravado, or drink, it was decided to go into it and look around. At first, the ladies were reluctant to do so, but they were cajoled into it by the lads. So even though it was private property, they climbed over the fence surrounding the land and entered the ruins. Naturally, as you'd expect, the lads began to fool around and tried to scare the girls by making eerie noises and jumping out of shadows. After a few moments, the girls decided that they'd had enough and said that they were leaving and would wait outside for the lads. Just as one of them turned to leave, she gave a loud scream and disappeared from sight. The lads thought that she was getting her own back and told her that the joke hadn't worked. But there was no reply, and after a few moments they began to feel the first pangs of apprehension, particularly as the other two girls were beginning to get a little hysterical at the disappearance of their friend. So the lads came over to them, and as they did so, one of them also gave a cry and also disappeared. At this point, they discovered the reason for these strange events. Apparently, the roof of the crypt had collapsed and the two people had fallen down the hole in the floor. So, as the lad shouted that he had sprained his ankle and couldn't walk, and the girl was stunned by her fall, the two remaining lads jumped into the hole to get them out. Remember, the area was actually brightly lit by the full moon, so as soon as their eyes had adjusted to the darkness, they could actually see quite a lot. Anyway, as they were helping their friends, one of the girls at the edge of the crypt hole suddenly screamed and said that she could see something near the people. They automatically looked, and each of them saw a strange, eerie white mist hovering at the far end of the crypt. At first, they thought it was the moonlight, but the mist began to take on a definite shape, if that's the right word. It was near the floor and seemed to become, and these are their words, like a huge slug about 4 feet long, with two pale yellow eyes, one on either side of the head. It wasn't actually on the floor, it just hovered about a foot above it. By now, they were all frightened, and their only thought was to get out. One of the lads reached up to the edge of the hole, the crypt was only about 7 feet high, and hauled himself up. And then the others helped the girl out, then the lad with the twisted ankle, and finally they reached down to help the last lad out. But as they grasped his wrists and started to haul him up, they suddenly felt him being pulled down again, and the lad screamed that he could feel something holding his ankles and pulling downwards. Quite a tussle ensued, and eventually the lad was pulled to safety. But as they lay on the ground getting their breath back, they noticed that this strange slug shape had now appeared by the side of them, and now they could smell the awful stench of rotting vegetation or something equally as nasty. And the fear that they felt was almost tangible. They could almost reach out and touch it. By a great strength of will, they stumbled and fell out of the ruins. And when they'd got onto the other side of the fence, they ran like hell to their car and drove away. The next day, this young man found strange marks on his ankles. They were livid red and looked like he'd been gripped by something with 3 stubby fingers, and the area was surrounded by very heavy bruising. Interestingly, this young man still has those marks to this day, although they now look like white scar tissue. There's no hair on them, nor will they tan in the sun. I've seen them, and the skin is absolutely dead with no feeling in it. As these things will, not too long afterwards they related their story in the pub one night, and their mates had a good laugh. But it soon got back to my ears, and I decided to look into it a bit further, even though I at first suspected that it was probably just the effects of drink and the surroundings. And when I approached the owner of the property for permission to investigate, I was met with derision. Nevertheless, I was allowed to visit the ruins, And the upshot of my work was that I also experienced what the young people had, except that as I had all the right equipment with me, and I'd had the help of a psychic sensitive, I was able to establish some facts. And I took a remarkable photograph, not of the slug-like thing, but of a strange, luminous trail of some slimy substance which the shape had left. My investigations afterwards revealed that the church had been originally the site of a very old church built sometime before the Doomsday Book was written. It was mentioned there. And over successive centuries, the building had been demolished and new churches built on the spot. But in the mid-1700s, during the time of the witch hunts of Lancashire, I found a record which stated that a local hag, who was thought to be a witch, had been finally run to ground in the church, hiding in the crypt. And the record shows that she was accused of conducting infernal compacts with the devil there, was found guilty, and was burned. And for years afterwards, divine service in the church was often interrupted by strange noises and awful smells of corruption, until eventually, despite attempts at exorcism, the church was deconsecrated and abandoned. Now, I said that this thing had happened 6 times since 1976. One of the people it happened to was a friend of mine, and he's a psychic. And he told me that the thing which still inhabits the ruins is an elemental of the lowest order. An entity conjured up by someone who either didn't know what they were doing, or who deliberately did it and left it there to guard the spot. I've not been back to the church, but I intend to do so very soon. And when I do, I'll let you know of the elemental. Is it still there, or isn't it? Unless, of course, you'd like to come along to see for yourself.